Hi Ardelia, welcome to our podcast. Ardelia is the CEO of Mapan, a company focused on women empowerment through new income opportunity and financial access. So once again, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ritu, and thank you so much for having me. Super excited to talk to you as well.
Perfect. So walk us through your journey so far. How did you end up becoming the CEO of Mapan?
Yeah. Oh, wow. It's been a long journey. I actually was an intern at Mapan when I was at my last year of college. So I think that was 2014. So that was the
Not
early days
back.
of Mapan. For me, it feels like a lifetime, but yeah, I guess not that far back. So in my last year of college, I found out about Mapan through a leadership workshop. Aldi Haryo Pratamo, who was the founder, was speaking there. And at that time, there was no such thing as tech startups, and kind of like a social enterprise and such. And I was really intrigued by the concept of social enterprise, first and foremost, how you can deliver impact to people that are probably less affluent, right? And still make money off the back of doing the business. And also the concept of technology used to empower people in general. So I joined as an intern first at Mapan, but at that time I already signed with McKinsey as a management consultant. So at the end of my 3 months with Mapan, I joined McKinsey. I always thought that my McKinsey journey was like a little bit of a crash course of what it would feel like to work with a multinational company, with the global standards, understanding business acumens that is probably not so much part of what we are taught at school here, right? And so that was my mindset. I entered McKinsey 2 years, and then I was reached out by the management team of GoJek at that time, right? And so that was how I first really got into tech startup as my permanent job. In 2016, it was its early days. I think the app was just launched, etc. And so I spent 5 years, I think, in the GoJek group. First, I started the driver benefits program. And in my second year, I actually transitioned to GoPay, which was the fintech arm of GoJek. After that, I did a stint as a country director for Element, which was an AI company focusing on biometric solution. And I got the call to rejoin Mapan. I think I made that decision probably within a few days. I was really excited because I think at that time I felt like throughout my journey, what I've accumulated, right, and where I was in my life, it just felt very full circle. I think being asked to be the CEO was definitely a stretch and a leap for me, but I felt very at home to make that leap.
Wow. Were you always interested in the start? So there are a couple of threads as you told me that. So there is the startup thread. Then there is a certain element of the social enterprise thread, because also in GoJek you said you worked on the on the incentives of the drivers and providing them financial access. And then of course there's Mapan. Was there always an interest, or did you develop it along the way?
I definitely developed it along the way. So I've been kind of like, I've never had a specialty all my life. I felt like I'm always kind of like a generalist. And so I did not know right away what I wanted to do, out of college, right? I think even choosing what major I should take at college, like I left it mostly to my parents. And I think kind of like entering McKinsey was my way to learn as much as possible of the options, right? Because we get to work with projects of various types of business, industries, functions, etc. So I'm kind of, getting to know more and more kind of like what I like, what I dislike. But even so, I would never thought that my decision would end up being joining GoJek, like a startup company at that time, because it was not even in the vocabulary of what we were working as a management consultant. But I think what I've developed along the way, it is less so about the topics, it is less so about the function. I think for me, I'm so lucky to be able to try something and then like it so much that I end up specializing in it, right? Like the fintech and social enterprise space. But in the back of my decisions was always which role do I think can catapult kind of like my potential more, and it had a lot to do with who were my leaders at that time, who were the team that I got to lead, and what was the company's mission about. Is it something that excites me, right? So it's a lot of intangible, I guess, factors, but I'm a big believer of that, because I do think it comes down to personality and culture fit the most compared to the other kind of like more tangible things. And so that was what I was basing my decision on.
Great. I mean, you've said so much, and I want to unpack a few things. So firstly, thank you for sharing your journey once again, because I think it's so, it's pretty impressive, because, you said you joined Mapan straight out of college, and now you're the CEO of the company. So it's obviously been a very fascinating and a very fast track journey. Few things. So first thing, you talked about, how you went from, you joined McKinsey, which is a very different firm, multinational. Talk to me a little bit about the culture or the changes, the learnings, the challenges that you kind of faced and you overcame while you were there. Talk to me a little bit about those 2 years there.
Yeah. Oh, wow. It was definitely a huge culture shock. I definitely did not speak as good English as I do now. It made me really, really like shy, and it makes me really, really not confident, I guess, in what I'm capable of during that time. Because even in communicating, it was already like such a task, right? Even before we get to the content and everything. But I love the culture of McKinsey, and I think it actually ended up to be what shaped me, because at that time they had a special track for people who graduated from the local universities, right? And to some, maybe they feel like, oh, that's such a segregation. It's actually not. It gives you kind of like a path where people understand kind of like where you're coming from, your context, and what you need to work on more, and give you a little bit more time and leeway to adapt and adjust. And so that really, really helped. And I think another thing worth mentioning was, I think I learned mentorship, like real mentorship, the first time from McKinsey. Where of course we have managers for our own projects, we have our personal development mentorship, but I've never felt like someone cared so much about me, I think, in a professional context, right? And it is not just about caring and attention, but really putting the effort to get to a detailed understanding of what are my strengths and what are my weakness, and really putting the time to build a path to kind of like work on them. And it was very methodical. They have a very structured mentorship form. So I think those two things really kind of like shaped my confidence and how I ended up kind of like absorbing all the learnings from my 2 years there.
Sometimes, especially in Asia, right, because of the cultural context, English not being the first language for most of us, so all those things can actually, and I've seen in my own work, especially with women, that can work as sometimes as a barrier, language, and that makes us shy, and therefore we don't put our hand up for initiative, and therefore then we don't build visibility and things like that, right? Like everything connected. So I'm glad you shared that how it taught you, how you overcame that, and that's what we want our emerging women leaders to kind of understand, that language is not a barrier. We can quickly learn and again work it and make it work to our advantage. So thank you so much for sharing that. I want to double click a little bit on mentorship. You said that was the best mentorship you'd ever seen, experienced. How much of that are you today as the CEO of Mapan carrying into the company's culture?
Oh, wow. I always say mentorship is probably the number one factor that got me to where I am today along my journey. So it's also something that I hold very dearly in terms of putting it in my company's values, right, and the way that we run the company. I think at the baseline of mentorship is basically kind of like seeing people as like a whole human being versus kind of like a worker, right? So it's less so about kind of like, oh, these people can do modeling, and this person can do good PowerPoints. Of course, all that, right? But I think the context of kind of like building those natural characters, foundations, and values out of people is so much about kind of like who you are as a whole human, your background, your context, versus kind of like where you are at work, right? For us to be able to have that openness to talk about, I'm never really going to be really great at this part, but I'm probably going to be really great at this part, right? Which I think is also that strength-based learning is something that I hold really dearly. And so that's also the second part, I think, of the mentorship, where you also choose areas where you think you can excel, right? And really hone in on that. And I think as a women leader, I think that's one of the things that built my own confidence when doing that, because as I'm going through it with my mentor, but as I'm mentoring other people as well, it makes me feel more normal in my own journey as well, right? Because like you can be compassionate to others, why can't you be compassionate in mentoring yourself, right? And so I think that's kind of like the third part of the mentorship values that I try to bring to the company as well. Yeah.
Nice, brilliant. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges that in your journey you saw. What were the top one or two challenges that you faced in these last 10 years?
Yeah, definitely confidence. I think that's one first and foremost, and I think probably true to most women. I never thought that it was external. To me, it was purely internal, and I think some people thought it's external because that's what you end up projecting, and it's easier for you to evaluate. But most of it, I realized, is your internal narrative of whether you are the woman that you expect yourself to be, or whether you believe that you are the woman who deserves a place in this room. I think I still remember one of my managers early in my days used to say that you're really capable. The only difference that will make between you doing tasks versus you leading stuff is your ownership, right? Like it's you owning your capability, your role in something, and that is purely confidence, right? And so I think in building that own narrative in my head, personally, that was, I think, the toughest, right? And think as you become a woman leader, more and more you feel that there's a smaller percentage of women in the room, right? As you go higher and higher up. And so even today, I think it's still, a continuous struggle for me to work on. And I think the second part is really about defining success, but it's not about defining success in the long term for me. It's not about kind of like, what do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years? I've never asked myself that, by the way. But it's more like, how do you define success right now, right? Day to day, who you want to become at work. Is success winning an argument at a meeting, or is success kind of like building peace in the long term and the relationships? Like these type of trade-offs of kind of like defining the micro successes that will lead to the larger success. So I think those two are the areas of challenges for me.
This is so interesting and so relevant. The confidence piece, and you articulated it so well, saying there's external and internal, and a lot of time the external is driven by our internal narrative. Ardelia, how did you overcome that? Or as you said, how, and I can say from my own experience, and I have been working for last 25, so I'm like really old in front of you. But it is something that even now, once in a while, I have to tell myself, right? So how do you overcome that?
Yeah, sure. I think definitely still struggle with that to today, and I don't think we will ever stop, right? Because it's kind of like how we are geared. But some of the things, I think it's different throughout my journeys. In the early days, I really focus on my content. Like I really want to be good at this. Like I want to deliver good content in terms of my work. I want to do it really well. So over preparation was the biggest thing that drove my confidence, I think, in my early years, right? I felt like I'm over prepared. There is nothing I cannot answer, etc., etc. And then I got to like a middle management type of role. And I think the confidence there had so much more to do with your relationship with your peers, right? Rather than delivering your own individual contribution, plus your relationship with your team, which I think was a big, for someone who's very like in their feelings like me, like I think a lot about like my team and how I am to them. So that was like a big challenge as well. And I think in this part, like self-awareness and brutal honesty about kind of like your context, your strength, your weakness, and really what you're thinking of at that time was really powerful to me. Like I started not to treat like these feelings of, for example, you come into a meeting and you feel like, oh my God, I was so like blabbering so much, I'm not getting my point across, etc. A lot of these internal narratives, I think typically people don't ask each other to validate that because they're embarrassed. And I think when I started kind of ask my peer or my team, etc., what was I delivering at that meeting? Was it good? Was it not good? Did you get the message, etc.? It's how I knew that 90% of my thoughts were just my thoughts. And like most of them are actually not reality. So choosing those allies where you can be like really honest and feel really safe to validate your inner narratives was really helpful. I started just like saying how I'm feeling, how I'm not confident, and it builds that level of honesty as well from my team to me. And so we're just always in the know of what are the challenges, right, of every team member. Now, as a CEO, I guess more of the challenge is going to come from kind of like pitching to investors, etc., right? Which is something that is completely different. I don't think like you can ever train yourself to do it, but I think the way that I try to overcome it is, it seems silly, but I feel like I've gone full circle and come back to over preparation. And that could mean practicing with other people, etc., to kind of like really hone in your pitch, etc. And so that has actually really helped me again now, right? But at the bottom line of it, I think throughout the journey is just to never be afraid of feedback. Is really how I built my confidence.
Wow, yeah. I think you said such great things. I love the fact that you distribute it in 3 parts: starting your career, over preparing, then when you get to a middle management, then there's relying on relationships, your team, your people. And now, as a seasoned leader, in your case as a CEO, you've gone back to like over preparing. So sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes we need to rely on relationships. So it's a combination. And
right.
And the feedback, yeah, great. What do you see, Ardelia, in your world, women leaders, especially emerging women leaders, struggling the most with, or things that you say, gosh, like I wish I could tell them this and this could help them? What do you see as their challenges?
I think number one is definitely, I think, first you have to build that self-awareness, right? Yeah. Of kind of like mindfulness, where you are, why am I here, why did I choose this job, right? And what am I lacking from this job, what am I getting from this job, and how do I get to the next steps, right? These are like incredibly difficult questions to ask yourself. I do think this part is really important, and I really feel really lucky to have been around people and workspace that has taught this, right, about self-awareness, etc. And it doesn't stop only by acknowledging, oh, this is my strength, this is my weakness, but what is under that, the iceberg theory? Yeah. Like, why are you behaving that way? What context, maybe 10 years back, maybe in your childhood, maybe something really random that makes you behave a certain way and becomes a blocker for you or becomes a moment of strength for you. And coming up to the second thing, which is, I think, visualization, manifestation. I do think it's really important to manifest. I think one of the most powerful sessions that I had in one of the trainings done by McKinsey was visualize where you feel that you were at your best. I never got asked that, and I never thought to myself, what do I look like when I was at my best? What are the behaviors that I project, right? And what was about that situation that was very supporting to me to be that person and to be my best self? I try to imagine that always in a very difficult situation. What would be the best exit here, rather than trying to like figure out little by little how you solve the small issues, but at the grand scheme of things, what would be the best outcome? And I don't think we pause enough to ask that, not only in work situation, but our life in general. When choosing a career, what would the best career, like best next job look like, right? And so I think taking those pauses to ask yourself that is very important. And I think the third thing that I believe that some of the most important people in my life that made me a woman leader today is the men in my life. I have some amazing men mentors, right? And I never shy myself away from actually rallying these men mentors as well as men peers, team members, etc. And I do think it when you surround yourself with the right men, you validate your confidence as a woman so much. It's actually to make you understand that contrast is acceptable and someone is okay with the contrastness that you built. And so I do really feel that it's such a powerful thing if I reflect back how I've tried to bring that contrast in, but of course by the right people, I think not only just any person, right, men or women, but like the right people who can come in and really bring in a contrasting perspective to you, that you feel that, okay, this contrast is acceptable, I am confident with this contrast and how I differ. Yeah.
No, that is a great point. I like the fact that you talked about the male allies, because sometimes that is, I have seen women leaders being reluctant to reach out to their male counterparts, either to mentor them or even as their allies. But I also know that in this journey of women leaders coming more and staying more and more in workforce, male allies or male leaders play such a big role. So I'm glad you brought that up. I know you did say that you define success more by as of today, but if I were to ask you a little bit, taking a long-term view, how do you define success for yourself, Ardelia? What does success mean to you?
So this will sound like a little bit personal, but I think my life goal is to reach inner peace. And so my career, anything that I work on in this life, I crave the feeling of peace internally. It's a difficult feeling to achieve for women overachievers, I feel. And so I'm always trying to optimize that by aligning myself more and more to who I truly am at heart, right? This was one of my biggest challenges, right? Defining my success even day to day. And so everything that I choose on the way there is things that will make me feel more and more aligned, making me feel more and more at peace. And I really believe that I will be a very successful person when I can maintain my own inner peace, because I believe I can project that tenfold to other people, right? Yeah.
Okay. I know you're very young even now, but I'll still ask the question. If you were to look back at your younger self, would there be any advice to a younger Ardelia?
To me, I think definitely to my younger self, what I would say is to be kinder to myself is, I think, the number one things. I think I wanted so much so fast and was so critical to myself, right? I still think I still want so much so fast right now, but I think I was just less accepting of the process that I need to take to get there, to get what I want, that I can't just always be the best person in the room, the smartest person in the room. And I think that to me was the thing that maybe in the outcome, right? Like the outcome is pretty great. I have no issue with the outcome, but in the process, I think so much about the inner peace part and who I am internally, personally, compared to my outcome in my career would have been way smoother and way better.
What you said is correct, because I've asked this question to so many women leaders, and almost in some shape or form, in some words or the other, people have just said this: be kinder, be more appreciative, be more accepting. So you're right. Ardelia, I've really enjoyed our conversation, and we can go on and on. So, but before we wrap up and before I summarize, I do want to take this opportunity for you to share a little bit more about Mapan. What does Mapan do? Because again, I just think it's so pertinent to the topic we are talking about, women leaders. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about the company.
So Mapan is a company that focuses on how we can empower women, especially at the bottom of the pyramid, the mid to low income economic bracket, to basically attain the things that they need to upgrade their livelihood, right? So Mapan means financial stability in Bahasa. So that's basically kind of like the core thesis. The business model that we use is a community rotating savings model called Arisan, which is very much ingrained in the Indonesian social activities. And so we've taken that, we digitized that, and we've changed the purpose of that to kind of like doing a collective saving together to afford household items that you need in your house, right? And so in the dynamic of this, we create groups of women who has women leaders. In this case, they become our agents, quote unquote, who organizes the arisan and become our online to offline kind of like bridge to more and more women. And so these women also get a commission so that they also get an income for their family, etc. So it's really kind of like how we can benefit the influencers, right? The women leaders within any micro community they are to basically spread this collective growth message to the collective saving model and gain something by doing that, right? But also giving more access to more women around her to basically be able to kind of like upgrade their livelihood. So that's kind of like our business in few sentences. Yeah.
Wow. So good. So thank you so much for sharing that. And as we wrap up our conversation, there's so much I took away, but three things actually that stood out for me that you talked about is, one is the whole confidence piece about external versus internal and how it's our narrative, and how as women leaders we can all change our narrative through, one of the things you talked about is through getting feedback, brutal feedback. And for that, you need to have the right set of people around you. So build those relationships early on. The second piece that stood out for me in our conversation was mentorship, the importance of mentorship and the role that mentorship played in your career, and how it's a tool that's available to all of us, but we need to reach out to kind of, to really maximize its benefit. The third piece I liked about, the whole thing, how you go switching from role to role in what you do to prepare your confidence. And I love the fact that you said, you over prepare sometimes you rely on, making sure you just have the right relationships. But again, you can go back to over preparing and over practicing. So those are really tools for women leaders to build their confidence. That's one of the practices. And of course, I loved your philosophy about inner peace and, how do you define success? It was such a pleasure talking to you, Ardelia. I'm sure our listeners are going to get a lot from you. Once again, congratulations and all the best for everything you're doing.
Thank you so much, Ritu. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure.